So, hello everyone. My name is Marta and I'm the co-editor of the European Alternatives magazine. Thank you for joining, listening, and watching. Today we're joined by Oleksandra Matviichuk, a leading human rights defender from Ukraine and head of the Center for Civil Liberties, which received the Nobel Prize in 2022. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, she has helped document war crimes through the Tribunal for Putin initiative under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court in all regions of Ukraine, which became the target of attacks of the Russian Federation. In this interview, we'll discuss Europe's roles in the world, international justice, and the importance of civil society in times of war. Thank you so much for your time, Oleksandra. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for this invitation.
The first question we have is in regards to Europe standing for human rights and democracy. If you think Europe is living up to those values today?
I think that these dramatic times test all of us for dedication to our values. And Europe now in a situation when the current generations who live in European countries, they inherited their freedom, their democracy from their grandparents. It means that they have never fought for them. They became consumers of democracy. They start to take these values for granted. And they start to see freedom as a possibility to make a choice between different cheeses in supermarket. They forget that freedom and democracy are very fragile. You can't attain these values once and forever. You have to make your own choice every day. And we also observe how people in European countries start to put into questions the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And when elections come, people in different European countries that treat themselves as a stable democracies start more and more to exchange their freedom for populist claims, for economic benefits, for security promises, but first and foremost for their own comfort. So we are going through the test, and I really hope that Europe will pass this test.
So what kind of role do you see in global politics today for Europe, particularly after the war in Ukraine? Do you think Europe has become more independent, or is actually closer to the opposite, to become more also dependent from other nation states?
I see that Europe slowly starts to wake up. The first bell was in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine and started large-scale war. It's not the first time when Russia invaded Ukraine, but in 2014, Europe didn't see this war as a problem for itself. But now, from 2022, it became obvious that Putin started large-scale war, not just to occupy one more part of Ukrainian land. He wants to occupy and destroy the whole country and move further. He sees Ukraine as a bridge to Europe. His logic is historical. He dreams about his legacy. And that is why people in European countries, they are safe only because Ukrainians are still resisting and don't let Russian army to move further. And the second bell, it was the peace negotiation process initiated by President Donald Trump, where Europe is not even a party. Because if you want to be on the table, you have to put something on the table. And this need to change the way of thinking and to do a lot of decisive actions with Europe slowly, but since 2022 start to do.
And I'm based in Italy. It's a country that has been showing strong support, particularly to Palestine. Do you think it's important to show transnational solidarity with people affected by different wars, such as in Ukraine, Palestine, Congo, or elsewhere? And if so, why?
Sure, it's important. If you want to fight for justice, you have to do it globally. Because we live in a very interconnected world, you can't build a paradise, even being an island, when another part of the globe is bleeding. The problem is that people are very selective in their solidarity. And it's a human nature, unfortunately. Let me illustrate it with example how we are all interconnected. When in 2014 Russia invaded Ukraine and occupied Crimea, it was unprecedented step in post-World War history, because it was the first time when country officially annexed another part of another country. We haven't seen them after the Second World War. Not just occupy, but officially annexed and made the changes in their constitution. So it's total ruination of the international system of peace and security because it's break their principles, the non-use of force, the inviolability of state borders, it's violate UN statute. But let's be honest, the reaction of the world was very weak. And this year, I was in Davos, and I heard the speech of Prime Minister of Canada, Carney, and he told that the world order has collapsed. And I asked myself why it takes 12 years to acknowledge it, the fact which is obvious for Ukrainians. And then I understood that probably Prime Minister of Canada before thought, and people like him, before thought that the world order has collapsed only towards Ukraine. But toward them, their countries, the UN system and statute, UN statute is still working. And now it became obvious that it's domino effect. And if you close your eyes for something that's going on in Crimea, sooner or later, you will face with a threat to your country directly.
And building on that, how would you see can ordinary people and civil society organizations meaningful contribute during war and conflict?
I can express our Ukrainian experience because we have unique system of governance. It's not something which widespread in well-developed democracies. Because in well-developed democracies, if something happened, people can rely on sustainable and effective state institutions. It's not a case for Ukrainians. For obvious reason, just 3 decades ago, we got a chance to restore our independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And just 12 years ago, we got a chance after Revolution of Dignity and collapse of Russian authoritarian regime to build sustainable and effective state institutions. So we are a nation in transit, we are in a process. And this situation had an impact of way of thinking of people and produced another pattern of behavior. We are not waiting for intervention of state institutions. We self-organize. And Ukrainian example is a bright example how important is the vibrant civil society, because in times of existential crisis, it's a literally backup for the state. 5 years ago, when large-scale war started, not just Putin, all international partners were confident that Ukraine has no potential to resist to such enormous opposing power, and Kyiv will fall just in 3 or 4 days. I was in Kyiv at that time. I refused to evacuate. we continued our work on the ground when Russians tried to circle my city, and I remember how international organizations evacuated their personnel. They left us alone. But ordinary people remained, and ordinary people started to do extraordinary things. Suddenly, it became obvious that when enormous amount of people, ordinary people, once again, and emphasize on it, stayed behind the state institutions who are not well developed, not very strong, not very effective. This institution can continue to do the work properly. And this is Ukrainian lessons learned, that even in the 21st century, experts and analytics from Western democracies, they don't see people behind numbers and ratings. They exceed the potential of Ukraine only through the potential of state institutions. They don't understand the impact of people, and ordinary people can have a much great impact that they can even imagine.
And what about the role also of cities and municipalities, or even cultural institutions might also play in international politics during war and conflict, that are maybe having also a bit of this balance between civil society and state or European institutions, but are perhaps a good hybrid actor in the context of international politics during war?
Very important, and I can present Ukrainian example. When we speak about cities, we have to acknowledge that strength of Ukraine is not in a centralized vertical. The strength of Ukraine is in local democracy, in self-organization, in grassroots initiatives, in freedom of speech, in agency of ordinary people in local communities, and their belief that their efforts matter. So this decentralized approach, when you see the country as a community of communities, it's very vital and essential, because it's very difficult to crush in one moment all communities. And when we speak about cultural community, it's something that is not understandable still for international partners, because they're not in our shoes, and they don't understand still clearly that this war has genocidal character. And Putin openly says there is no Ukrainian nation, there is no Ukrainian language, there is no Ukrainian culture. For 12 years, we have been documenting how these words converted in horrible practice in occupied territories, where Russians physically exterminate active local people and communities, mayors, children writers, teachers, environmentalists, musicians, human rights defenders, journalists, how they ban Ukrainian language and culture, how they destroyed and robbed Ukrainian cultural heritage, how they take Ukrainian children to Russia, put them in Russian re-education camps, told them, you are not Ukrainian, you are Russian children, your families, your parents refused from you, and you will be adopted by Russian families who will bring you up as Russians. So in this situation, we see the increase of cultural voice from Ukraine, because it's a very natural, I even say biological response of national group who was told that you do not exist, try to be more vocal. No, we are. We exist. We have our culture, we have our traditions, we have our language. We're not Russians. We exist. And parallel to this aspect, culture provide a possibility for people who has no war experience, like in Italy, to understand what's going on in Ukraine. Because it's a huge difference when you read the news, look to the photos and videos, and to be on the ground and to experience it. It's a huge difference. And I would never wish anyone to go through our experience. War is horrible. Probably the most horrible thing that can happen in human life. But culture make a symbolical space where people without this experience can enter, and very safely for them, they can understand main senses. One example, when large-scale war started, my life was totally ruined. Everything which I call normal life was ruined. Sometimes journalists ask me how my life was changed with the Nobel Peace Prize, and I always answer no. It's not Nobel Peace Prize that changed my life. The large-scale war changed my life completely. For me, for millions of people in Ukraine. And suddenly you understood that hundreds of things that you recognize as important are not important at all in your life. And just several things have value. To live for them, to fight for them, and unfortunately, as we see in Ukraine, to die for them.
And within this context, also, you as a spokesperson of the war as a woman, we see that often women are portrayed as victims in war. How is it possible, or how important is to recognize them also as agents of change, or as leaders, or perhaps also as actors that might be bringing different methodologies or even understandings of how to react, combat, live, resist, and survive in war?
We have in our database more than 100,000 episodes of war crimes. And among these episodes, there are a lot of crimes against women. But let me assure you that women in Ukraine are not just victims, women are fighters. I know enormous amount of fantastic women in different fields of society. Ukrainian women joined armed forces. Ukrainian women take political decisions. Ukrainian women coordinate work of huge civil initiatives. Ukrainian women document war crimes. Women are in the far front of this battle for freedom and democracy because bravery has no gender. And through this gender perspective, it's very visible for what this war is about. Because Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014, not because he wasn't afraid of NATO. In 2014, Ukraine was a neutral country. We had neutrality status in our constitution, and nobody planned to join military bloc. A vast majority of population were against. Now situation changed for obvious reason, because population in Ukraine started to see NATO as a possibility of collective defense. But in 2014, it wasn't the case. And Putin invaded Ukraine because he was afraid of idea of freedom. And freedom, it's very important for everyone, but especially for women. Because in authoritarian countries, women can perform only a assigned role for them in families and societies. And this is a basis for authoritarian regime, because the existing relation between people and society always reflect a society idea what government can do towards its own people. And that is why private became political. And that is why women in Iran now are being killed for wearing inappropriate clothes. Women in Afghanistan are prohibited to study in schools and universities. And when we speak about Russia, even domestic violence was decriminalized in Russia because, once again, it's always just a projection what government is doing towards its own people. And that is why in this war with Russia, while we Ukrainian women resisting Russian aggression and occupation of our homes, we also fighting for our daughters because we want our daughters to live in European civilized dimension, not in a Russian world where they have to prove that they are also human beings.
Within this context, how should Europe also, in order to protect its people, balance its strategic interest and the needs interest of infrastructure around security, energy, water, migration, with the protection of its people and human rights?
When I told that Europe slowly but start to do some steps, I mentioned also the change perception to security, because fourth generation in Europe start to take security like oxygen, that it's always exist. They haven't invested into security and their defense, and they rely on United States. And now it's obvious that United States it's not a guarantor for Europe, and that is why I see the right way of thinking for European leadership of different countries start to develop the Europe security autonomy. And it's good also that they start to see Ukraine as an integral part of this collective European security, because it's completely changed a perception in the right direction. Ukraine is not just beneficiary of Europe's support. Ukraine is a strong contributor to European security. But what is still lacking? Let me return to the beginning of large-scale war. That time, European Union told, let's help Ukraine not to fail. Together with other international partners, they start to provide Ukraine with the weapons to be able to defend itself. And first real sanctions against Russia were introduced into force. And we, as a people of Ukraine, we are extremely grateful. It's also a good opportunity for me to say thank you, because it's helped us to survive. But it's also an explanation why Ukraine was waiting for a first modern tank for more than a year. Why Ukraine was waiting for a first modern plane for more than 3 years. Why was still waiting? For creation of special tribunal on aggression, for confiscation of Russian frozen assets, for long-range distance weapons, for more precise and honest policy to confiscate and arrest and confiscate Russian shadow fleet that bypass the sanctions of oil and gas, which is not a shadow. This fleet, it's possible even for students from university identify these ships. So I can continue this list, but I will tell you why. Because it's a huge difference between let's help Ukraine not to fail and let's help Ukraine to win this war. And we can practically measure this difference with types of weapons, with speed of decisions, with gravity of sanctions. And the problem is that the time for us is going differently. While Europeans leaders still debating, we are dying. The time for us converted in numerous deaths in battlefield, in numerous deaths in deep rear, in numerous deaths in occupied territories. But I think it's irresponsible when we speak about European countries themselves, because they also have no time. They also have no time. And for the whole last decades, it's was only Russia who was proactive. Russia committed something horrible, then presented it like a fait accompli, like new normality, and push European countries to reckon with it. And that is why we are here in this historical moment when in December last year, Putin openly said that he's ready for war with Europe. Because it's only Russia who has strategy. European Union was always just reactive. It has no strategy to Russia. It has tactic, which called non-escalation management. And this approach completely failed. It's time to acknowledge it, that it failed. That if you have aggressive neighbor who want to restore destroyed empire, your tactics not to escalate will not save you. And Russia is empire. Empire has a center but has no borders. Empires always try to expand. And it depends not of your non-escalation management, but only of one thing, whether or not the empire has an energy. If empire has no energy, empire will wait to have this energy and start to attack other countries. And I hope that it's not too late for Europe to return initiative, to implement their own strategy. Because when you just react, when you just tactical, it means that you play in Putin's rules of the game, and you will never succeed in it.
And what would real accountability for war crimes in Ukraine look like in practice for you?
I work with people affected by this war, and I know that people see justice very differently. For some people, justice means to see their perpetrators behind the bars. But for other people, justice means to get compensations because they lost everything. And without this, they will feel unsatisfied. For some people, justice means to just to know a truth, what happened with their beloved ones. For other people, justice means to get public recognition that something that happened with them and their families are not just immoral, but also illegal. And for this purpose, to be publicly heard, to share this pain with others. So it means that we have to develop the comprehensive justice strategy with different elements and institutions to reach all these needs. We have to create special tribunal on aggression to acknowledge that in 21st century, it's not okay to invade another country, to kill people there, to erode their identity, to steal their children, to occupy their territories. That aggressive war is prohibited as such. We have to continue investigation of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. We have to confiscate Russian frozen assets because justice has financial meaning as well. We have to do a lot. And just to finish with one very important feeling, my colleagues, they organized meetings with survivors of Russian war crimes. They try to facilitate the communication between legal enforcement bodies in Ukraine, the survivors and their representatives. And they always ask them during this meeting what justice means for you. And more people start to answer that for them, it means that the world has to know and to call a spade, that Russia is aggressor, that Russia uses war crimes as a method of warfare in Ukraine, and they're doing horrible things with people which is beyond the sense of humanity. So it's very interesting that for people who had went through the hell, this symbolical level of justice, just to acknowledge the truth and to call a spade means a lot.
My last question to close would be if we would be able to be looking beyond the war, what would be your vision for the future of Europe?
I believe in Europe. It's I think that while this dramatic times test all of us for true leadership, true courage, true responsibility, we also have to remember that only readiness to defend our values define a society with a future. And I know that in different parts of the globe, people are also fighting for freedom and human dignity. And Europe, that historically created a space with a very high level of human rights standards, can do an essential role, can play an essential role in a process of spreading freedom in the globe. Because Europe is less about geography, it's more about their values of freedom and democracy and rule of law. And I think that Europe can, in future, create this non-formal union. I don't mean the bureaucratic formal structures European Union itself. I mean more about platform with countries who start the democratic path or are going on this path, like Ukraine, nation in transit, to help them to strengthen freedom as well. And I hope that when it will be happen, Ukraine would be a part of European Union and can do it from inside European Union.
Thank you so much, Oleksandra, for your time. We really appreciate it.